Welcome everybody. This is today we're doing another session on maximizing CFO productivity. Today we've got terrific people joining us from Tipalti. Joe, welcome. Nicholas, welcome. We're going to be talking about empowering automated finance excellence. Tipalti are a leading partner of NetSuite, and let's get stuck into it. So before we get started, this is being recorded. If you've got any questions or comments, please raise them in the chat. And also everyone's on mute. We'll be able to share this afterwards. Joe, terrific. Thanks for joining us. You're a senior solutions consultant with Tipalti, hailing, I think, from the great nation of Sweden.
That is correct. Yes.
And you're leveraging tons of years of experience, 10 plus, helping clients work in the AP and the AP P2P workflows. So really great to have you along. For those who care to connect, Joe's LinkedIn details are there. And of course, myself, I lead Etter+Ramli, an independent managed service provider to the NetSuite community, and a long-time supporter and user of NetSuite. Joe, listen, just to put everything into context, I wonder if you can give us a quick highlight on you. Tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, of course. And thanks for having me today, Todd. So some high-level stats. We have already established I am from Sweden and I currently live in the UK, but I have also worked in more countries than that, such as Finland, India, China. I know way too much about India's tax requirements after spending some time there. So I've been in the finance, ERP, and automation space for over 10 years, like you said, Todd. And during these years, my focus has mainly been in professional services and a number of industries within that, such as engineering, software industry, as well as advertising. And prior to joining Tipalti, I was part of over 10 ERP deployments, some smaller, running over a few months, and a couple of enterprise rollouts, which is really how I progressed in my career.
Terrific. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about Tipalti to put it into context for and your experience as well.
Yeah, of course. So I started working at a software company straight after uni, grew into the role as a project controller and system administrator for the ERP. And I was actually part of implementing that ERP internally during my first months at the company. So really thrown in at the deep end there. And from there, I moved across to working for the ERP provider. I was a business consultant, so I got to use my experience in finance, and I got to develop it even further as I was part of some big enterprise rollouts. And I progressed internally, which also is how I relocated to London, as I was working on one of the projects that was run out of the UK office. And eventually transitioned into solutions engineering. And yet again, I got to use my experience in finance as well as the ERP deployments that I had been part of to help find solutions and efficiencies for the finance team, but of course also operations and the bigger, wider organization. And then just over 2 years ago, I joined Tipalti as part of the founding team in the UK. I joined as a solutions consultant, and yet again, I'm in a role where I'm speaking to finance personas that are looking to create efficiencies within their finance processes, now with a focus on purchase to pay, accounts payable, and mass payments.
Terrific. Lots of experience that's highly relevant there for us. Okay, let's put some things in context about Tipalti so that we know which part of the puzzle you're talking about. Obviously AP, but fill us in a little bit.
Yeah, of course.
Flip over and start to talk about Tipalti and how it works, because the full breadth of the application might not be fully understood. So
absolutely,
please.
And I'd love to talk to you about this. So in regards of Tipalti, so Tipalti is a global payables automation solution that streamlines all phases of AP and payment management workflow in one holistic cloud platform. So Tipalti really is aiming to make it painless for accounts payables teams to manage their entire supplier payments operation. And the first step of this is, as we can see here, the supplier management. So we manage everything from supplier onboarding to vetting. And to the next point of tax regulatory compliance. So in the US, we help to capture digitized W8 and W9 forms and so on. Then we get to the third point, and this is where invoice processing comes in. And this is traditionally what a lot of people think of when they think AP automation. They think OCR only, where we do use OCR as well, but we have 3 layers to our invoice processing. One of those is also machine learning. So we're taking it even further there. And then the next point, which is probably quite different to a lot of other solutions out there, and that is that within Tipalti, we're also executing the payments to the suppliers on your behalf. So you can actually produce a payment batch stretching across your different entities, being paid out with different payment methods and in different currencies. And we pair this by also automatically emailing the suppliers, letting them know what they have been paid and which invoices they were paid for. And then the final point, just really to top it off, is the reconciliation and reporting. And here we have the pre-built API integration into NetSuite, ensuring we're working alongside NetSuite, because we're not looking at replacing NetSuite. We're just looking at creating efficiencies within the accounts payable process.
Yeah, terrific. That's really helpful. And I've noticed in here that we've got some videos and some case studies. If you guys want to see any of that stuff, we've got Nicholas's email at the end, so you can reach out and grab all of that stuff from him or indeed from us.
Perfect.
Thanks, Joe. So let's talk a little bit then about what does the future of this look like from Tipalti's perspective?
Yeah, of course. So as I mentioned, we launched in the UK just over 2 years ago, and we are investing heavily in Europe as a region. And we're looking to help businesses achieve sustainable growth with our localized solutions. And to do that, we have strategic financial institution partnerships to ensure that we're compliant as we're doing payments. So we're FCA regulated in the UK, regulated with the DNB in the Netherlands to cover all of the European Union. And now more than ever, businesses do need localized tools to help reduce and in some case eradicate manual processes. And this is helping to drive efficiency and to give that company competitive edge, because really time spent on manual finance processes is time spent away from more strategic initiatives that can help drive further growth.
Yeah, I hear that. Well, thanks, Joe. I think we're going to have a terrific conversation later on. Just to put things into context, so my firm, Etter+Ramli, we're NetSuite client-side managed service providers. We're independent of the partner community, and we engage client-side to help clients really get the most out of the system. We're a resourcing solution in that we engage as a managed service with a mix of skills that's deployed across a group of people and retained on a monthly basis. We call our methodology managed success, and we wrap it up with a full service delivery model, which I'll explain in a moment. We're a modest team, but we look after users in 36 countries and growing. And I've personally spent about 22 years either using, deploying, or managing NetSuite across the world, and everyone on the team is handpicked by me, which means they're pretty good, probably the best. Okay, so our managed success really talks about the life cycle of clients. What we find is that clients normally go through 3 stages before they get to the ideal stage of business partnering, which is really where productivity gets unlocked. The first stage talks about triage, which is effectively just making sure users can do what they need to do to move on. And depending on how well they've been managed since deployment, that may or may not be a difficult task. The next thing is really to talk about automation and making sure that anything that can be automated is. And once we get over that hump, we then focus on compliance. And compliance is around data cleanliness, process gates, and really just making sure the processes are working the way they've been designed to work, and ultimately yielding good metrics and good insights. Once these three core things are under control, that tends to free up the business to be able to focus more on strategic outputs, like what you mentioned before, Joe, and really look at productivity gains. And then we just manage those three inputs constantly while we're working on productivity enhancements. Managed success is really foundationed in a very simple idea, which is an IT managed service, but coupled together with the customer success ethos. And so, because we're running this client side, we're really only tied to the definition of success from the customer's perspective, and that could be a multitude of inputs, not just the software input. Ultimately, all this comes down to is productivity and growth, and the way we impact clients' organizations is to that end. We really measure ourselves on those things. Naturally, because we deploy as a managed service, we're sharing the experience that we have and the insights that we gain from all of our clients. Obviously, as our knowledge grows, those usefulness, that knowledge is being deployed. And because we only work aftermarket, we're really only working with clients who are functionally using NetSuite to get the most out of it. And that, candidly, I thought was a trivial argument until we had to work with it, and we found that working with NetSuite after go live is vastly different to what it is to deploy it. So that's some of our insights and our focus. Terrific. Well, that's us both introduced, Joe. Let's pivot now. Let's talk about when's the right time, do you think, for a business to move to something like Tipalti, in your opinion?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that's a very interesting question. And of course, it varies business by business, what their plans are, what the growth and scale is looking like. But what we typically see is, if they have around 100 or more invoices, that's where you can start seeing benefits in regards of automation. And as I mentioned, AP automation is so much more than just OCR. It's not just about the coding of the invoices. So when we're talking about 100 plus invoices, that also includes onboarding of new suppliers, managing the queries from them, saying, hey, I received a payment, which invoices were I paid for, and that type of questioning, as well as the time you're spending on executing payments to the supplier. So we're really looking at it from beginning to end. But what we typically see is when it's around 100 invoices, but also where you're seeing future growth, if that is increasing the number of invoices, working across more suppliers, or perhaps you're expanding your footprint into new countries or regions, which typically does mean more complexities and more time spent on the process.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I mean, look, to be fair, Joe, 100 sounds like it's a little bit on the short side, but I do appreciate your point about growth. And yes, if a business is growing rapidly, then adapting to that change, they may move from 100 to 200 to 500 very quickly. And I guess the point that you're really touching on is that with a solution like Tipalti deployed, then as they move through that scale, they're letting technology take the fold without necessarily scaling employees behind it.
Exactly.
And so I get that. So if they're more or less a stable sort of business and they're processing 150, then that may or may not have an opportunity cost. But if they're very fast growing and they're moving from under 100 to more than 100, then it's probably a good value prop for them.
Absolutely. And what I think, even with 150 invoices, if that is a sole person's job, manually keying those invoices in, perhaps there's some issues with retention of employees in that role. There's other aspects into it as well that might mean that it actually justifies the investment into seeing, could automation help make this better? Because a lot of finance people have studied for a long time and are doing quite manual tasks that may not be, let's say, the most fun tasks to do, nor the things that they actually did go through all those years of education to do. So there's different ways of how you can look at it, but absolutely 100 invoices does sound low, and it's not for everyone. That's what I mean with it comes down to business by business, but especially where you see growth, to be able to increase what you're doing with that time without increasing the headcount is quite crucial. And we also see a lot of our customers move in more to a shared service center. So perhaps they have employees performing AP tasks in all the countries where they have presence, and with a solution such as Tipalti, you're able to centralize it more and yet again create more efficiency. So it's about really shifting focus from time-consuming tasks to the high-value activities. And I think even a company with 100 invoices would see benefit out of doing that.
Yeah, look, I mean, I get it. I mean, this whole aspect about productivity on the AP side is not a new topic. I mean, we went through waves of outsourcing, which in the early part of my career, and I'm sure that there were other strategies, even before then as well. So this continual advancement of technology and the continual drive of business to create productivity gains in these areas like AP is only going to advance further. And so I really get where you're going with that. Terrific. I mean, but doesn't this all mean that we've got just a doubling up of duplication of applications and another thing that needs to be managed?
I do think you have a very good question here, and absolutely it is 2 applications, but I would argue that as in this case, we're moving the AP tasks out of NetSuite and into Tipalti. We're not duplicating any processes as we have that pre-built API integration. And that's not just about getting transactions from Tipalti into NetSuite to ensure accurate reporting, but we're also pulling master data from NetSuite into Tipalti. So let's say that you are creating a new department or a class value, or perhaps setting up a new expense account in your chart of account. We're pulling that through from NetSuite into Tipalti to ensure that we have the 2 systems aligned. Because when it comes to that type of data, NetSuite is definitely the master. So from that point of view, we're not looking at doing any type of double processing in any way. And yes, some of your users will have NetSuite user as well as a Tipalti user. These would typically be the ones that work within the finance team. But for instance, your invoice approvers would very likely just have a user into Tipalti, and very likely they're never logging into Tipalti because they're just actioning, approving, disputing, whatever they need to do on an invoice level directly from their emails.
So I guess what you're really saying is that I've got a user in NetSuite, and I might have a few different users in Tipalti, and because of the productivity gain, the Tipalti user can just stay Tipalti users, and the integration works, and then the NetSuite person who is overseeing all of the AP is more or less managing it, but their productivity, their cost per transaction, if you like, is decreasing at the same time.
Absolutely. And what I also think is important to think is it is a different application, but in Tipalti, we're also inviting the suppliers to onboard, so provide their payment details, see their invoice history, their payment history, etc. And we're executing the payments as well. So in some cases, we talk to customers that had separate solutions for the different steps of the process, whereas with Tipalti, you get the full end-to-end. And of course, that paired with that API integration into NetSuite to ensure that your reporting is accurate and you know and can trust your data.
Yeah. I mean, inside of NetSuite, you've got the vendor center, which does some of that stuff. It's a little bit dated in the way it looks, but for the frugally minded, it does work. But candidly, over a lot of deployments, we've never really seen a lot of people take it up.
We do hear that as well, and also to think that this is the main thing that we do. NetSuite does so many different things, whereas this is a key part to our offering. And just example of if you go out in and update your payment details as a supplier, we have 2-factor authentication. just to ensure it's the right user doing the right thing. So there's added layer of securities built in through the platform, because that is, of course, one of the key elements when it comes to executing payments. Are we making this payment to the right place?
Right. Yeah, no, I can get that. I can get that. I can see how that part is resolved. Now, listen, you've touched a couple of times on this concept of Tipalti being the payment solution as well. A lot of people in NetSuite use electronic payments or bank payments of some description. I'm very curious to understand this, because it sort of sounds to me like once the bill is set up and it's approved, then it's kind of like a set and forget. And I know a few CFOs, and they kind of maybe want to manage the cash flow a little bit better than a set and forget.
Absolutely. So to give you some context to this, 13 years ago when Tipalti was founded, it was a payments first company. So it was about executing mass payments. So a different type of use case than the traditional accounts payable. Since then, we have, of course, grown into a full accounts payable, but also procurement expenses solution. But really, as you say, within Tipalti, we have a few customers using this, typically smaller customers where I was talking to someone in their finance team, and she was saying, when that invoice is approved, I have validated it, I know it's okay, and I want to pay it on the due date. And it's actually possible to configure Tipalti so that the payment on the due date happens automatically and goes out. So there's no additional steps required. But rightfully, as you say, Todd, majority of the customers I do speak to, they do have steps of control. So you have someone preparing the payment batch and someone else typically approving it. Could be more than one person, depending on what your policies are looking like. So there's definitely ability to add in control steps based on what your organization's steps are, policies, etc. Because that's what it really comes down to, right? And even though you may have those steps in there, you're still saving a lot of time, because in Tipalti, you can actually produce a payment batch containing payments across your different entities in different currencies and different payment methods. So in theory, I could produce one payment batch for all my payments that week to go out of Tipalti. So there's still time to be saved and efficiencies to be gained, even though you may not take the automation all the way to what is actually possible from a payments perspective.
Yeah, right. So as a customer, I can opt in or opt out of elements of the process. I don't have to come in with all of the elements, including the payment function as well. I can keep that. I can keep that part more or less in my domain, while still leveraging Tipalti, but just not push it through your banking network providers.
So typically, what our customers do is they are using the full end-to-end offering on Tipalti, and the reason for that is that's when you see the most gain of capturing the payment details to executing the payments and letting the suppliers know they have been paid. So if you recall, I mentioned that we automatically let them know, and that happens when the payment's been successfully processed. And the only way for us to know that is because we execute that payment. So majority of our customers are using the full end-to-end, but you can still have those steps of control to say, we're going to have someone preparing the payment batch, and we have another user that has different access that is approving that payment batch.
Yeah, no, it makes sense to me. I mean, it always comes down to the devil in the detail, but
absolutely.
But I get that. I get that. Now, listen, I've got to be candid with you, Joe. I'm a bit of a do it in NetSuite, get it done in NetSuite kind of person. I don't really like applications that have got integrations, mostly because all integrations are kind of have an inbuilt risk of failure because it's a communications. And so let's cut to the chase. Who's monitoring the API?
I do think this is a very good point that you're making, and you're not the only one that we talk to that have that opinion. So absolutely, it is an integration. When it comes to who builds it, maintains it, etc., that is Tipalti. So our customers don't need to have any development resources. Sort of comes out of the box. Of course, we set it up based on what your reporting requirements are. Are you using department and location, but not the class field, etc.? Just to ensure that we're not breaking anything when it comes to how you want to do your reporting, Todd. Then when it comes to monitoring this API, so if something were to fail the sync, as a user, yet again, user access would control who has access to this, we'll be able to go into a specific part of the user interface in Tipalti, see everything that has synced ever, but there's also a specific part where you can see anything that has failed to sync. You will see what record type it was, you will see why it failed to sync, and there's also a remediation step. So basically telling you what the suggested solution for that is. So that is definitely something that is there. We're also sending emails to you if that were to happen. So it's something that you don't need to continuously log in and check. You would be notified if something did fail.
Well, that gives me a little bit more assurance there, Joe. Particularly if you've got that that oversight built into the API, and users don't just find out 5 days later when it's broken.
No. And
right,
we have also, it's also an area that's continuously being looked at from a Tipalti point of view. Is there sync errors happening? Can we do anything to mitigate them before they happen, etc.? So one thing is, for instance, if for some reason your supplier or your vendor record couldn't sync across, or your invoice for whatever reason couldn't sync across, when it comes to paying, you're going to be notified. So you're not trying to pay that invoice, because that would build a sync error on top of a sync error. So there's continuously things we're doing from a maintenance perspective to also enhance the experience. Because as you say, with integrations, things can go wrong. But it also can be as simple as you have closed your posting period, and depending on how you have set it up, we're not going to sync an invoice into a closed period, because that would cause you even more trouble than what it's worth.
No, fair enough. Well, you filled me with some assurance on that. I'd love to see it in action, but I kind of get it. So it's been a topical conversation this week, and it's been a hot topic for the last year. The area of AI has always come out as something that really is about automation, and that's changed remarkably in the last 12 months with the rise of generative AI and whatnot. I understand that Tipalti is doing some things in this area, and I'm curious to understand what that looks like and how it fits in.
Yeah, absolutely. So in regards of AI as a whole, there's of course possibilities to further enhance and automate the workflows and the processes. And finance is one of those areas that traditionally have had a lot of manual work, not necessarily where it's giving the business the most benefit. And AI can be a way of taking that even further. So in Tipalti, we've used machine learning for a long time to reduce manual coding, identify duplicate invoices, and so on. And with Tipalti Pi, which is what we call our machine learning or AI, we're able to unlock new levels of productivity across the Tipalti hub using AI. And we have recently released enhanced functionality on line level coding. So on expense account prediction on line level, we have seen an accuracy of up to 95%. So it's just about taking and reducing the manual work and effort that's being done even further. This can, of course, also be paired with the ability to query into and ask how many invoices are outstanding for a particular supplier. So you can ask questions instead of drilling into the data to find out. So I'm quite excited about what the future has to hold. Of course, it has to be done responsibly, but I do think there's a lot of benefits for the finance team to yet again be able to shift from time-consuming tasks to the high-value activities within the finance team, because finance will always have things to do. I'm not that concerned about that, but it's more about reducing the time spent that could be spent elsewhere and have a better output, let's say.
Yep. Well, for the time being, accounting is still the scoreboard. They're still the scorekeepers of business. So I don't see that changing anytime soon. So
Me neither.
So that's a positive for the accountants in the room, like myself. But I also think that business is not going to stop trying to automate and get more out of that from a productivity perspective as well. And you know, we apply generative AI in a few different areas of what we do, and some of the productivity gains have been quite massive. And initially, of course, it was all about words, but now it's becoming increasingly about numbers. And I noticed in a recent update to OpenAI's tools, they're now doing data set matching on analytics. And I haven't given it a try, but I'm sure my mind is going to be suitably blown again in this area. So it's full of issues, and we won't go into whether those issues are dealt with or not with Tipalti, but suffice to say that it's an area that you guys are working on. Joe, listen, I've really enjoyed chatting with you. I mean, obviously from Etter+Ramli's perspective, we're approaching the problem of user productivity from a managed service perspective, and we try and our levels of measurement include things like the cost of transaction, decreasing cost of transaction, decreasing license per employee, and these sorts of things, output per employees. I've heard you say a lot of the same things, but from a different perspective. And the thing that binds us is whether we come at it from a software-only perspective or from a managed service perspective, the outcomes are the same. Candidly, I think there's a mix of the two, but functionally, as an aligned engagement, lowering costs, lowering risks, and improving quality really bind us to the same outcome. And I find that to be a really refreshing and an enjoyable focus, even though we've both got different interests in that outcome as well. So I've really enjoyed the conversation. You got tons to talk about. So listen, if anyone wants to get connected, obviously, please feel free to reach out to us. Nicholas, you've been in the background the whole time. Your email address is on the screen there. So if anyone wants to get in touch with Nicholas, he's going to make sure that you don't have to bounce through some generic email. He'd be more than happy to pick up your email and action it. So thanks for joining, Joe. Again, truly appreciated the opportunity. You've got tons of experience, and I think we've covered some interesting topics. In fact, what I'd like to do one day is maybe do a demo or work through a business case that users or the audience might be able to join, but we'll pick that one up later. So thanks again, and you have a terrific day.
Same to you. Thank you, Todd.